Hey, welcome to Smoker Broker. I'm Robert Mission. I am the Smoker Broker. Hope everything's going well. Happy Thursday to you. Getting into the summer, everything's great. Everything's moving forward. I'm done with COVID. I'm not even addressing it today. Probably the first time in 3 months, and I'm happy to say that. We're done with it, moving on. I'm not even going to get into the other stuff. It's just beyond comprehension. So I'm not even going to talk about it, right? I'm just not even going to do it. We're going to talk about real estate today. We're going to talk about what I love doing. We're going to talk about helping you guys. We're going to talk about a really good topic that I enjoy that probably not enough real estate agents adapt to or practice, and that's setting expectations. This business is built around setting expectations. Everything funnels through expectations. And the good realtors out there know that if the expectations are set, it's going to make the process a lot more smoother than it normally would be. Believe it or not, setting expectations actually even help when we have real problems, like when it really falls apart. Because if the expectation had been set prior to that something like this could happen, it makes it easier to accept that, well, it's not at least a shock. But if you don't tell somebody about it and then it happened, you got what's coming to you, because there's going to be disarray. There's going to be, I have no idea what you're talking about. And it's just going to be a complete disaster. So we're going to help you today with setting those expectations so it never goes that route. And you might be surprised on my take on how we do that. You might be surprised on how we set the expectation, because quite honestly, it's not the most pleasant conversation. It's not telling everybody, oh, you're going to love this. It's more like you're going to hate this because it's awful. So we're going to talk about that too. As always, I bring some of my guys on. I don't like doing the show by myself, and they're usually a lot better at it than I am. And plus, this show is not scripted. It's live. It's, live without limits. We can say whatever we want, because it does go through the internet. We're still careful on what we say, but it can go anywhere. We have a lot of people that watch, especially in the state of Texas. And we have a few people that straggle across the country that listen and catch the show every once in a while. The show really watch more on archived views versus live, because obviously people, it's tough when people are working, it's their lunch hour. It's hard to get everybody out and about, but it really is watched over archive for people who want to pick up. We have a good following of people who like to pay attention to the show, where it helps them, because it not only helps new agents, the show is just as much for existing agents, 5 to 10 year agents, veteran agents, anybody out there, and especially the general public. One of my biggest hopes for a lot of people that watch the show, as far as real estate agents go, that they take the information that we give them and they share it with their clients, that they actually take the show and they say, you really ought to watch this particular episode, because I think it might help you quite a bit. But as always, I got Mike Ellis over there on my whatever side you want to call it. There he is. Mike's a longtime friend of mine, really good real estate agent. Mike's out of the Denton area. And like I said, he pretty much handles just about anywhere they go. Mike doesn't like just swim in real estate all day long, but he's a really good real estate agent. He's learned a lot over the years, and he's really sharp, and I know some of his contacts sometimes watch the show. Some of his contacts are my contacts, and Mike's a real good real estate agent. Anybody that's out there that does watch these clips, they really should reach out to him if they ever have any questions, because he besides his looks and his attitude, he's really a smart guy, so I tend to like him. Mike, how's it going there, buddy?
I don't know if I should take that as a compliment or not. I don't know how to take that.
It was intentionally blended, so it couldn't be either way. So
very vague. No, I'm doing good. Good to be here.
Compliments. Good to see you, buddy. And pretty much the same conversation with David Tanner. David is out of Coppell, and for the people that know him that watch the show, they should feel a lot of comfort when dealing with him, because not only from a professional standpoint does he understand what he's doing, he's very good about asking the questions to make sure he knows everything, to make sure he's doing it right. Me and him consult a lot on the conversations, and that's another plus about using the SWR group at Keller Williams. We are considered to be one of the largest teams in the country, especially inside the Keller Williams network, and we do pride ourselves on having the expertise and the competence to help our clients. So, in our group, one of the things that's a real plus is that it's really 2-for-1. All of my agents typically go through me. I don't like to say my agents. All the agents that are with me, we typically work together, and it's pretty much a partnership. So it's really 2-for-1. And you get the 20 years experience that I have and the experience that they have, and we put it together, and it really should make you feel comforted when dealing with anybody on our team. I have a select group of hosts that I put on our show, and these are people that I have great trust in. But for the general public that watches, I probably don't do a good enough job of talking them up. You don't just get to come on this show without knowing something. We have 125 agents. I don't just throw anybody on. They have to know what they're doing, and they have to have had a certain level of experience to be on it. So anybody who are their clients, they should be very grateful and feel very confident as to what's going on. So David, good to see you too, buddy.
Yeah.
Doing good down there?
Yeah, great to be here. Absolutely. Thank you.
Great. Fantastic. Always love
Doing good. Thanks for picking up.
Yeah, always love your input. It's a better conversation this week because honestly, I meant what I said about the COVID side of it. I'm really done with all that, and I'm not deminimizing it. I just think we're done with it. I will make one comment about not COVID so much, and I'm definitely not getting to the other episode there, but it is interesting that the COVID numbers are not shown on media anymore. Just like that, every day, 90,000 people dead, 100,000 people dead, bam, gone. One issue, and it's erased from existence. It kind of makes you wonder sometimes.
It does, doesn't it?
Topics are, and what is the media's true intent on delivering the message? Because I got to tell you, I take it a little personal. For the last 3 months, all I've seen is death counts of one particular instance of where there's thousands of other deaths on other things. But it takes one massive event, which is a massive event, and a culture change too, erases 3 months of horrific fear because those numbers have stopped. It's really fascinating if you think about it. It's really fascinating how we process information, how we view it, how we understand it, and how we react to it. It's an amazing world. It's good. It's bad. I love living in it. I don't sweat. I know there's terrible things out there. I know there's good things out there. There's a balance that you have to reach. And I enjoy the amount of differences that are out there, but whether they all come together or whether you all right over there, Mike?
Yeah, I'm good, man. Just
all COVID stays there.
Yeah, I guess I've got COVID now. I don't know, man. I don't know.
But it's a fascinating world in the end. So, like it or not, I like being in it. I do, with the goods and the bads. Life moves on. It always has. It always does. And it's how you perceive it and how you live your day-to-day life as to where the happiness that you find. And that's what I try the most in my life, is to make sure that it's the happiness that drives me in everything that I do, in real estate, in my family. And those are the things that make me happy. And those are the things I focus in on. I don't ignore what's going on in the world. And, one thing I will say that I've seen a lot this past week, trying so hard not to discuss the massive part of it, but I think some of it has to be discussed. The, what do you call it? There's been a lot of talk about the silence is the worst part now, about us being silent, about not addressing these issues. That's a fine line, because I agree that we are way past the times where we're like, well, I'm just going to ignore that and pretend it's not. That's not what needs to happen. We can't ignore something of that nature. But the communication of it, it's a fine line. It's a fine line where we go with that, because how far do you go with exemplifying your opinion or talking about it? And are you talking about the right thing? I'll tell you, one of my biggest struggles, and I don't mind saying it, I'm still not clear what the overall goal is. I'm not sure what it is that everybody wants. I know what the problem is. Believe me. I know that good and well. And I'm not going to talk about, I know what believe me, I've got it right. And I'm not going to share my stuff because I don't even want to get into it with anybody. I know I've got it right as to what's supposed to happen out there, but I'm curious as to what the rest of the world out there is saying what needs to happen. I'm not so sure because it's mixed signals when you hear people what they're upset about, what needs to happen. The Drew Brees fiasco. Good Lord,
that's why you're not getting into it right there.
Well, I gotta tell you, and don't get me wrong. Hey, look, if this doesn't make a statement, I love Drew Brees more than anything. But that was not a smart conversation from a very intelligent, caring man. That was not a smart conversation yesterday. I was very surprised by that, and that's kind of what I'm talking about. I really am. I'm just not so sure what the right approach is and what the right what is it that people are complaining about. I mean, you got some people that are complaining just to complain. They don't even know what the cause is.
They don't even know.
That's just sick. That I will say. I don't mind. I'll argue with anybody on that. Those people out there that are complaining just to complain, that's a problem. If you're complaining about the cause, I'm all for you.
Yeah.
Because this country is made to where you can make a statement and protest but those people that are just out there to be a part of something, I'm like, I don't know about that. And it seems to be there's a lot of those people that show up on TV. So that's a tough thing as well. But it is funny how we go through and draft our opinions on what we're going through. But it does affect us in real estate because it's another component that we have to deal with. Fortunately, this one doesn't affect us as much inside the business. This is more of a life conversation. But these are things we're dealing with day to day. And, part of the show, the show is focused on real estate, but it is also focused in on daily current events. We used to open the show with what's going on, and we're still
sports.
What's that?
Sports.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I wish we could. I mean, although I will admit, the only sporting event that's been recent, we should have talked about last week, was watching Woods. But I got to tell you, I love watching Brady just derail on national TV. Boy, he was awful. I mean, he did show some signs of brilliance.
Barkley was riding him.
Mike, was he not? He was just way up. A lot of people don't know. Mike is, he doesn't like being golf. Mike is a professional golfer, and he can tell you that was wheels off. Was it not, Mike?
That was bad. That was just horrible. It was almost unwatchable.
It was.
We could have taken him on a few of those holes.
Man.
There's no doubt.
Yeah, but not his partners.
To be fair, it was raining. That's got to be hard to make. Woods and Mickelson can do it, but I'm not so sure.
It is so odd though, because used to you'd watch the news and then you look forward to that that last sports segment. We haven't had that in over 3 months.
And I hope everybody, we're 13 minutes into the show, and I hope everybody appreciates the fact that we don't just jump right in and just talk real estate the entire show. We have a lot of.
We will get to it though.
Okay. We have a lot of people who watch for the social interaction too. So don't think by mistake that we start babbling just to babble. It's intentional. We want to have a little bit of conversation as to what is affecting us, because it does roll over into the business that we do. Okay, let's talk about expectations. I already see a comment out there. Mickey's watching. She watches quite a bit. Setting clear expectations is my number one lessons learned from my first fantasy. Yeah, see, I love that, because I'm going to tell you right now, Mickey, it's not just your first transaction. It's for all your transactions. It's for all of them, ever going forward. And it's the number one thing that if you tell them up front what's going to happen, it's going to make those conversations a lot easier when they actually start occurring. And one of my favorite things to say, and it's one of the things I always say, is when something goes wrong, I'm like, we talked about this. I go, you weren't listening when we talked about this. I go, I told you that this was a sincere possibility. And sometimes it doesn't change the negativity. The negativity is still there, but it makes it a whole lot damn easier to go, wait, this isn't new information to you. This isn't the first time we've read this. You're right. It is a number one lesson. It is something that should be done every single day. And Mickey, what you're going to find, along with a lot of the new agents out there that watch our show, the more you do, the better you're going to get at setting those. I try very hard in all of my tutorials and training to tell you what those are, but and you're one of the best watchers out there, it's still difficult. It's so much information that if you've never done it live enough, it's very hard for you to come up with those expectations. So it's okay for you to make that type of comment, because even though you have the information that's out there, it's hard to remember it. So believe me, it gets better and better over the years.
Well, and even even setting the expectations up front, you're going to get curveballs thrown at you. Something's going to come up, but at least if you've set the main expectations properly, you're going to be able to address those as they come.
Yeah. So I like that conversation. I'm going to tell you that's one of the number one issues. That's one of the most difficult things for new agents as they come on. We can teach them, we can show them tutorials, we can show them step by step how to do this. There is nothing in the procedure manual for you, in any procedure manual or training tutorial, that addresses when you're sitting with husband and wife and they're getting a divorce and the husband says, well, I want to know what's going to happen when her new boyfriend, or the wife says his new girlfriend comes over. And, I'm like, that's not in the manual. We don't address, psychoness in the manual, and it does happen. Those curveballs happen. The manuals don't discuss what happens when the seller drinks a 12-pack in front of you inside of an hour and a half and goes to sign the listing agreement, which, by the way, has happened multiple times in my career. I didn't join them. I
should have. You should have.
I didn't. So,
you just offered to do the grill, right?
Well, I will tell you, in those episodes, I was like, man, that sure is a lot. I can handle my liquor, but I'm like, that's a lot to drink. Inside, an hour and a half. So
some people can't handle it.
But to your point, it's a curveball. So nothing ever, we are not perfect. We have to, address these issues that come up. So that's very hard for a new agent, no matter how much expectation you set. And Brent talks about, I found that the more pessimistic I am with my clients, the better prepared they are. See, Brent, there's a reason why Brent is a senior part of this company, as you guys are too. He knows that's exactly how I feel about this. In fact, we're going to talk about today, the more pessimistic you are, the easier it will become. You wouldn't think that that's the type of advice we would give on this show, but I'm going to tell you right now, that's exactly the advice we're going to give you. This is not a fun process. People are amazed. I mean, I talk in front of a lot of people. I'm asked to talk in front of a lot of people, and they're amazed when I start the conversation off about the entrance into the client process, whether it's buying or selling, that my opening line is, you're really not going to like this. There are so many people that are trained to open up with, oh, this is a great yay. It's not. It's not a yay. It's not. And I'd say this a lot on our shows too. There's a lot of people will tell you on the selling side that, well, you can actually say the buying side too. The happiest day of their lives outside of their marriage and their kids is, well, maybe their kids, I don't know about their marriage, but the happiest day in their life is when they get a contract accepted. And they're always so ecstatic about it. And, I'm just sitting over there going, this is probably the worst part of your life you're ever going to go through. This is, you're about to get into a process that is horrific. And I'm going to go through the barriers here.
Step 3 of 50.
Go ahead.
Step 3 of 50.
Step 50. Yeah, it's true. It might even be 100. It might even be 100. So we're going to talk about those things here, because those barriers are the expectations that have to be set prior to going into this transaction. See, Brent also said, I used to be very optimistic 10 years ago, and Robert changed that. That's a really great statement. Not because I changed it, because you adapted to it. I like that statement because anybody who's watching, they would tell you that that's awkward to say that I forced someone to become pessimistic versus optimistic, especially someone like Brent. Brent's a high attitude guy, with the very positive outlook on things. And for the record, I am too. But when it comes to setting this process, when you become an experienced realtor in this environment, you understand that it's a tough process. What makes a good real estate agent is the one that knows how to go through this stuff and say, hey, this is not going to be fun, but I've done this before and I can get past it. And when we set that negative expectation and we tell them that up front, it is going to make things a whole lot easier. So for someone like Brent to say that, you would view that as, God, Robert, what the hell did you do to him? I'm like, I didn't do anything to him except show him what the hell happened to me and how I got past that. This didn't become gray just because of age. Well, I mean, part of it is, but a lot of it.
Those lists.
Yeah. I was just about to say that
the cat's in the list.
I've been fortunate. I was just about to say, in my personal life, I've been very fortunate that we have not had a lot of hard times in our personal lives. So this has to come from the business side of it. But yes, the list, and Mike is referring to my wife's list that she gives me. This is infamously known, if you follow me, that my wife gives me some psycho list. I mean, as if I am just the biggest idiot in the world, which I am. But she spells it out for me. And literally outside of telling me when to go to the bathroom, those lists, Mike's right. This gray is not from those lists because they are brutal.
I think agents actually can make those expectations even harder on themselves.
So wait. That is a great comment. That is exactly what Dina does to me. I should give her praise because that's exactly what the list is. She is setting an expectation for me. It's an unrealistic expectation, but she is setting it. And we're going to talk about unrealistic expectations. Dina is a very good subject here. Dina can set me some unrealistic expectations sometimes, and that is setting herself up for disasters.
But you know what? But
not here right now. She would have popped her head.
I love this conversation because you're right. It can be very unpleasant. But you know what I tell clients? Both sides want to win. They want to be successful, right?
Everybody wants to win.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not trying to screw that other agent out of anything, and hopefully they're not trying to screw me out of anything.
Nope.
So we're both. I want to sell this house, and you want to buy this house.
Right.
So you both have, you're both going for the same thing, but you've got competing goals on both sides. And I'm working for my client on the buy side, and you're working for your client on the sell side.
Right.
And you're trying to come to that happy medium, and it is challenging, and there are going to be unpleasant conversations sometimes to get to the finish line.
True statement. It's typically not the client that ruins this process. I got to be honest with you. A lot of times it's the realtors.
Oh, you're right.
It's them not getting along and setting bad expectations into their client. And this is a very good part of this conversation.
Yeah.
Because when we're discussing expectations, it's sometimes the realtor giving the incorrect expectation to the client that causes the problem. Like, for instance, and this is a good takeaway from the show. We're trying to do better with takeaways. The inspection process. You talk about setting expectations. Hey, and Mike and Dave, don't let me forget. After I make this comment, let me make sure I do our sponsorship preview because I've been forgetting as I go through, and I just do it randomly. And I want to get better at doing it at the bottom half of the hour. The information is always on the bottom of the screen, but I want to make sure I do better with that. So in the inspection expectation, this is probably one of the most crucial parts of the real estate process, where the inspection, especially the general public, will be very surprised by this comment. I actually think the inspection negotiation is worse than the contract negotiation, the actual terms. It is more difficult because you have so much ambiguity. You have so much lack of experience between the client, some of the realtors, a lot of the realtors. They don't know what to ask for. They don't know what they're doing. So for anybody out there that's kind of 5 years and under right now, I'm going to really help you out here. And the veteran agents, they who watch this, we have a lot of team leads and managers who watch this process. This is a good one for you as well, because you do the same thing, hopefully conveying over to your agents. When we're setting those inspection expectations, y'all, there's a very big common sense factor that goes into this. This is an opinion, but it's mine, and I've done it for 20 years, and it's worked very well for me by utilizing this policy, and it's very simple. When you're dealing with the seller as a listing agent, you need to set the expectation before that inspection happens that inspection is going to look like the house is falling into the ground. Okay? You tell the seller, we need to be ready for the fact that if there's something major wrong with this house, and when I say major, that it affects day-to-day living, they better be prepared to fix it. What I'm talking about is if the air conditioning doesn't work, especially in Texas, if the heater doesn't work, especially in Maine, if the stove doesn't work, if the shower doesn't work. These are things that we utilize day to day. It is a reasonable expectation that we expect those things to work. If the inspection comes back and says they don't work, our seller should have already been prepared that they're going to fix that because we set that expectation. If you didn't set the expectation, you're setting yourself up, well, I'm not fixing that because they lowballed me earlier. I'm already upset, but that has nothing to do with this. If you had set the expectation, this wouldn't be a problem. And by the way, when we're talking about setting this expectation, we're talking about doing it in the listing appointment. We're talking about when we actually tell them a contract is going to come in, we want them to factor in the fact that not only are we going to agree to a contract, but these people are going to do an inspection and they're going to ask for a few more things. So don't think that the initial contract negotiation is the final. It's not the final. In fact, it could be the first of several more negotiations. We could be dealing with inspection issues. We could be dealing with appraisal negotiation issues. It's the first step. So if we talk about it in the beginning, we're going to do that on the buy side, and then make sure I do sponsor. On the buy side, it's even more important that you set the expectation. In fact, I would tell you it is the most important on the buy side. As a buyer agent, you better damn well have told that buyer before they go into that inspection what that report is going to look like. You need to tell them that they adhere to the state guidelines. If the house was built in 1970, they are going to tear it up. A lot of the safety features that were built in 1970 do not exist now in 2020. They've changed. You cannot expect a house that was built in 1970 to adhere to the safety guidelines of 2020. Those people have been living there for what, 40, 50 years? You're going to tell them to start changing because you want the house? That's not how that works. And if you feel like that, go buy a newer house. You shouldn't be looking at a 1970s house if you're not prepared that house has some older things in it.
Well, and that's a good point, Robert. And I've noticed that these inspectors today they're so good. A lot of them, maybe not all, but a lot of them are really good at, color coding these things. And they'll let you know, look, this is just for informational purposes. This isn't, I'm not telling you that this is urgent, that it's broken, that it needs to be fixed. I'm just telling you, this wasn't code. It isn't code now, but it was code when they built the house.
So that's a perfect tie into our sponsorship. Not even a set part. We didn't do that. And David just did it perfectly. So, when you're talking about inspectors, exactly what David's mentioning there, it does matter who you choose as an inspector. One of the sponsors of our show is a fantastic inspector, Martin Cooley out of BPG Inspections. There are plenty of choices out there for inspectors. We give our clients multiple choices. We do not want to tell them to use one particular inspector. But if they ask us who is our more preferred, which they always do, we have no problem telling them that Martin Cooley out of BPG Inspections. You can reach Martin at, Mark, put that number down so I see it. I don't have it in front of me. Yes, I do. 817-401-5700. 817-401-3240. Again, that number is 817-401-3240. Martin does a fantastic job as an inspector for us. He has everything what David was talking about. You know, he is reporting what he needs to, but on the other hand, he's explaining what should and should not happen. And that's what you need. It helps to set the expectation with the buyer, but then it makes it a lot easier when the inspector does the same thing. And we are very appreciative to have that type of vendor relationship. And again, we don't tell our people you have to use Martin. We have a lot of inspectors that we throw out there. We just have a very preferred relationship. And the fact that we've used him, I want to say Martin, we've used Martin now for 7 or 8 years. And I cannot recall one negative incident with him. Not one. There's his information down at the bottom. Thank you, Mark. That's not one time we've ever had an issue. And y'all, we saw a lot of houses. So I want to always thank Martin for being that business partner with us. Okay, back into setting expectations. This is a key component that's good to start off the second half of the show. There are barriers in the process of the contract process, okay, and the offer process. So the barriers can be identified as the first one, you have to negotiate the contract. The second one, you have to go through an inspection process. The third one, you have to go through an appraisal process. The fourth one, they have to clear financing. And the fifth one, believe it or not, is you have to hope that they show up. These are barriers to this process. It is our job to set the expectations of each of those barriers as to what can happen as we go through this. And I'm telling you right now, if you set those expectations, no matter how ugly they can be, your life is going to be a whole lot better off. So let's start off with the offer expectation. We anticipate that we will get an offer on a house. Believe it or not, all houses eventually sell. You can sit there and say, my house will never sell. I'm like, oh, it'll sell. If you put it at the right price, at some point it's going to sell. So we have to set the expectation that, one, we priced it accordingly. And if we didn't, due to the client, we've made it very clear to them what that expectation is. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I won't take an overpriced listing. I will, but I damn well will have made it clear to that seller. I'm going to do this, but if in 30
You better know what their expectations are.
Say that again.
You better know what their expectations are.
Yeah.
Because those two things right there they'll clash when it comes to an offer.
They're damaging too. You know, so we need to tell them, I'll go ahead and put your house at where you want it. But if in 30 or 40 days, all I hear are crickets and, hay bales moving through, it's going down. I'm setting that expectation right now. I am telling you that I don't want there to be a shock when I come back to you in 30 days and say, we haven't seen a damn person in here. And you want to know why? Because I told you not to do that the first time. So that's one expectation. Want to talk about a takeaway from the show? You set the expectation. If you're going to take an overpriced listing, you better damn well set the expectation what's going to happen, because you want to talk about it unplayed. Brent talks about how it's sunshine and rainbows, and then they're stunned when something goes wrong. This can be applicable to, you didn't say anything when you took the overpriced listing, and 30 days later, you're like, you need to drop 20 grand. That conversation's not going to go well if that's the first time you did that. I'm telling you right now, if you tell them you need to drop 20,000, they could be like, where the hell were you 30 days ago when we were talking about this? You were like, oh yeah, we can do this. That is not what you should have said. What you should have said is, I am not in agreement with this. I'll do it. But in 30 days from now, that will not be the same conversation. Negative, pessimistic observation. But when the time comes, you ain't going to be taking any crap from that person. They're not going to be sitting there saying, well, you didn't do that. And I certainly did that because I told you. So that's one barrier that we have.
All they're really doing is helping the other houses in the neighborhood sell faster.
Yeah.
That's
well,
right.
At the expectation, right? That's the first thing that they throw out. Why the hell are those other ones selling? Why do you think? Look at what they were priced at. Don't sit there and tell me why they're doing that. Aren't you concerned why they sold? You're the one who should be asking that. You're the one who should be asking why, because we told you. Now we can say in our group because I know damn good and well we did it, but there are a lot of
that's a great point. And I've had that same situation and conversation before, where they you give them the comps, you tell them where you feel like it's going to sell. And one of the things that I've really started focusing on is I'll show people, look, there were 10 houses that sold in your subdivision in the last, say, 6 months. Okay. Look at where they sold. What percentage of list price did those sell at? And they're pretty consistent.
David, you and you've done a really good job of learning how to do that, because you've learned already in your somewhat short career that, and by the way, David does have somewhat of a short career. The fact that he's on this show says a lot about how he learns and how we view his expertise. But me and David have had a lot of conversations about how to deal with someone when we set those expectations. And he's done very good with that. He will tell you, as he's telling me right now, that's an integral part of this business. Go ahead, David, with that comment.
Yeah. And it's a real eye opener. And I even do that with my buyer clients. I mean, I'm working with the buyer right now. And when we run the comps on houses that they want to look at, and I explain to them, here's why they've set this price where they have. Now, sometimes it's it's spot on. Sometimes it's a little bit higher. Sometimes it may be a little bit below. But even buyers need to understand where those houses are selling and why they're priced the way they are, because that makes them feel more confident in knowing that you know what you're doing and that they're not going to overpay for that house.
I made a comment a second, and I want to come back to it because it's a proud comment and it's meaningful, where I said confidently that, I know that our guys, when they're out there, I know they've already done that. They've been taught to set those expectations. I know there's a lot of other people out there that have not ever been told that. I see new agents at the office all the time, and I'm like, that is not how you do that. And believe me, I'll correct them. But in our particular group, that's something that I'm extremely proud of, that I know that our guys have gone out there and they've set those expectations. I'm going to tell you something too about me from a perception standpoint. And I want to make sure it's utterly clear. There are a lot of people that, if you follow me or you go through my shows or you listen to the things that I say or that I post out there, there are some people who will argue that I have an arrogant tone. I'm going to tell you right now, you don't know anything about me if you think I'm arrogant. If you knew where I came from, if you know the area that my family's from, there ain't nothing about me that's arrogant. Don't ever mistake the fact that my confidence is arrogant. I am extremely confident in what we do. By 1,000 times over, the things that we practice, the things that we do with clients, these are proven methods. Over 20 years of practicing in this industry, these are proven methods that if we do these things, we are going to be effective and we are going to stay out of trouble. And another thing I'm not shy about either, and again, this is something else that relates to some people's perception about the way I am. Y'all, we've never been sued in 20 years. That is not by accident. That is because we practice by the book. We are not gray area type of people. We focus on what we are supposed to do. When we're talking about setting these expectations, we are doing it because it's the right thing to do. It informs the client and it makes our transactions smoother. If you want to take something away from this show, these expectations, it seems real easy to do. It's only easy if you actually do it. If you don't do these expectations, you are asking for trouble. Okay, continuing on in the barrier process. So, and by the way, I'm probably going to have a follow-up post on that perception thing because I do get that a lot. And it started to annoy me in the fact I'm like, don't ever think that my persona, what I do, this is a confident system that we put in place, that we want people and we want to share it with them. The fact that we have a lot of people that follow and do the same thing, that doesn't mean a damn thing. I don't give a damn what anybody thinks about me. Yeah, I really don't. But as far as practicing and being confident in what we do, you better believe that that's what I'm a part of. And that's what I want our guys to have that confidence in. Okay, so we're going through, we have an offer expectation. Now we're going to get into the, we already kind of talked about the inspection expectation. You need to set the expectation for the inspection on what's going to happen. We talked about both sides about that. We talked about what can go wrong if you do not do that. So like, let's follow up on the inspection now that we're going through the process in order. Let's follow up on the inspection expectation. If you, as a buyer agent, didn't set the expectation about what we ask for, when that report comes back, it is human nature that the buyer is going to ask for ridiculous things. I, along with David and Michael, have seen the same thing where if we didn't set that expectation, the buyer, and this has happened hundreds of times, the buyer actually says, when we ask them, well, what is it that you want repaired? They look at us and they're like, well, the whole damn report, of course. I go, well, that's my fault.
Yep.
I'm the dumbass there because I should have told them that ain't happening. And y'all, anybody out there who watches and doesn't believe that, oh, it happens. It happens where they actually, they're 38 pages long. And they'll come back and they'll be like, well, I want it all repaired. That's ridiculous. Okay. And that is the fault of the buyer agent.
I mean, if you're a repeat home buyer, most buyers, you know, they understand that because they've been through that before, or maybe it's been a really long time and they had forgotten, or if it's a new home buyer that's never been through that process, you better set that expectation early on because they will want everything.
Yeah. Again,
they
don't understand it.
Well,
they'll expect everything.
Yeah.
That's right. Good point.
They'll expect it. We're the ones who set the expectation to them. If we set it 90% of the time, they will follow it. I will not lie to you. I have set the expectation and they're like, F off. And they still ask me the same thing. So you can set the expectation and they still come back and say, yeah, I appreciate that, but this has nothing, you will do what I tell you to do. So sometimes it doesn't work, but 90% of the time it does. And to be fair, the 10% of the time it doesn't, it makes it a whole lot easier. Like, I'm not going to have this conversation with you. I already told you, if you want me to ask these, I will ask them, but I'm going to tell you right now, this is going to be the response. And it helps for your expertise that when you ask and the other agent comes back and says exactly what you told them, I've actually quoted word for word. I was going to say 50 times, but it's probably closer to 100. I quoted word for word what the other agent is going to respond. I'm not kidding either. I mean, like a whole sentence long where I've actually said before, I'm like, I'm going to do it for you, but I'm going to tell you right now, that agent is going to say, this is absolutely nitpicking. This has nothing to do with this. I've quoted word for word. I've had it so bad where the client goes, you told them to say that. I'm like, I did not. I go, I knew that's what they were going to say. I told you that's what they were going to say. So it does matter when you set the expectation. A huge takeaway from the show today, especially on the buy side, you've got to set the expectation as to what we are going to ask once we get that report. Because if you don't, they are just going to fire away, especially safety issues. Like that's one, and we've talked about this on other shows, but one of the more popular ones that come up, the wall is not firewall proof. It's not firewall. Houses back in the 70s weren't built to where if a fire starts in the attic, it just spreads immediately through the wood rafters. Well, now they're built to where it can contain itself. That's something that sometimes people, well, that needs to be fixed. So I'm like, why don't we just rebuild the whole damn house too? Why don't we take all the mortar out as well? We can't. There are certain things we cannot do. Yes, it's scary to look at that. The the electric panel. The electric panel comes up all the time. If you have a house that's built in 1960 and you have like one of those Pacific whatever, the inspector every time is going to say, this panel has been noted to be dangerous. Now, when you see that, and I will give a little bit of faith to the general public that when you see something like that in the inspection report, you're like, well, that's got to be fixed. I'm like, easy. I agree that that's not my most favorite panel, but I also agree that I knew I was buying a house from 1970. And the expectation of fixing the fire panel, where does that stop? Where does that stop? Does it stop with there's asbestos in the floor? Does it stop with there's possibly mold over the 40-year history of this house? Does it stop with the water heater is not 12 feet above as per code? Does it stop with the dryer vent that for 50 years in this country exited in the attic now has to go out? Where do we stop? At some point, you have to set the expectation. This is an older house. If you want to fix some of those things, that's fine. But to ask the seller to do it is a real insult to the seller. They've been living there for 30, 40 years. If they thought it should have been fixed, they would have fixed it themselves. That is not their opinion. It's yours. So you have to have an expectation. So that's a big takeaway from the show itself. Let's see. The appraisal expectation. You need to set an expectation that it is very possible the house might not make value. This is important to say to the seller from the beginning, that even if we think we have it right, we are dealing with a very subjective appraiser.
Especially when it's priced 10,000 high.
That's right. And this goes back to our initial expectation, right? That if we priced it high, and let's say we were lucky enough to get an offer, that's where we double down on our expectation. Like a lot of times the seller will be like, I told you. I'm like, it's not done yet. I go, we're not done.
Yeah.
I go, well, yeah, we got someone that bought it, but now we got to wait on this guy to tell us what I already told you. They're going to go through and match this house with other homes in the area that are comparable. And when they find out what I already told you, they're not going to allow this house to go through financing. That's fun too when a seller does that. Like I told you, I'm like, told me what? It ain't over.
And that's where it gets really tricky for the listing agent, because if they've done their job, they've explained to the client, listen, this is where I think this house will sell. This is the comps support this. And then the seller says, no, I think it's worth 10,000 more than that, or 20,000. So you're putting your package together, right? And you're leaving that there maybe for the appraiser to look at. And then they're going to come back and say, no, this didn't make appraisal. And then their client's going to be pissed off.
Yeah.
But you already told them that. See, so, and now they're upset because the buyer can't get the financing for it.
I'm actually going to link that for time purposes, I'm going to link that conversation in with the setting expectations that the deal might not go through. And we're going to end with this. We still got about 5 or 6 minutes with this, but this is how we're going to finish the show up with this one, because this is probably the most important one. It's the way we started shit and the way we're going to finish it. The greatest expectation that we have to set is the worst expectation, is that this deal, in fact, could fall through at any point in this barrier process. At any point in this barrier process, this deal can fall through. And you, as the seller, have to be prepared, no matter how awful it is, that this is an extreme reality in this process. Now, I'm going to tell you over the years that expectation being communicated doesn't go over very well with the buyer or a seller, because in their eyes, this is a perfect, happy process. And I'm like, well, it's not. I've been a part of over 4,000 sales at some point in my career. I'm going to tell you, it's not a pleasant part. And it's a reality that it can happen. I want to say, I checked this not too long ago, 14% of the homes fall through. Higher in more volatile markets. You might not think that 14% is a lot. 14% is a decent chunk. I mean, if you're a gambling person, you have your eyes on 14%. You know that there's a possibility. Actually, something that's really good to relate this to? or maybe it's not. And the weather forecasting, they're such a joke. You really don't know what's right or wrong in there. But how many times does the weather forecaster say, well, there's a 20% chance? You're like, oh, it won't rain. And then it's like pouring. It's a monsoon outside.
Yeah.
It can happen.
Yeah.
It's a reality. So it shouldn't be a shock. Now, nothing is going to take away the unpleasantness, the fear, the disappointment when someone backs out. We've talked for the last 2 years on this show that the absolute worst part about real estate is when someone backs out of a deal. There's just nothing pleasant. And 20 years in, I still have never found a way to politely tell someone that it's going to happen without it making a bad feeling in my stomach. So it's not going to fix it when it happens, but I'm going to tell you, and this is a fact, it makes it a whole lot easier to address the subject if you've talked about it before in depth. If you've told them there is a possibility that this can happen, if you told them there's a possibility that, and I'm just going to talk off the top of my head on things that have happened, that the person lied about not having to sell a house to buy this one. And then the day before close, they say, well, our buyer backed out, so we can't do it. And the person's like, what the hell? That's a reality. It can happen. It's a reality that the person can lose their job 2 days before and not be able to purchase the house. That's happening right now as we speak. In fact, that's probably going to consume us for the next 6 months with the record level in unemployment, that happens. I've always enjoyed, and when I say that, it means I don't. I've always enjoyed when a seller, when we had to communicate to them that the buyer has to back out because they lost their job. I love the response of the seller. It's typically very selfish. It's typically very like that POS, blah, blah, blah. All they're concerned about is how horrible it is for them. And it is horrible for them. Nobody's sugarcoating how horrible it is for them. But to sit there and not have enough human compassion that someone just lost their job, think about it from their end.
Yeah.
Not only did they just lose their job, there's fear in when they're going to get their next one. And now they're being told that they're not credit worthy. That's about as low as someone can feel on a day-to-day basis. It's amazing to me how many sellers just don't give a shit about when a buyer tells them that. I'm not talking about a buyer that backs out because they shrug their shoulder. That's one you should be pissed about. But a buyer who has lost their job, I'll even go further with you and even more deep and more grim and more sick. When a buyer dies the day before. And I've mentioned this on other shows before, but you want to talk about the evilness in people.
Or a seller.
Yep.
I've had where the buyer has passed away the night before and we had to communicate to the seller and they're like, well, I don't care. They're going to close anyways. And I've joked about this on shows before, but I'm not joking. We have to set those expectations. We have to tell them there is a possibility that something random can happen. This is not a done deal until that money has switched hands. And don't even think that it's done just because you signed the title company. That doesn't mean a damn thing. You want to take a takeaway? You want to take the final takeaway as we end the show today? Just because you signed paperwork doesn't mean it's over. It is not over until your bank has sent that money to the other bank. It's not over.
That's right.
It's just not over. Okay. So
closed and funded. Until you hear those two words, it's not a done deal.
Yeah. And believe me, it has happened. And those are bad too. So I love this show. I love this topic. This is a big topic. And I like it when we go off the formal, this is how you fill this in to where, hey, look, so I love the negotiation contract, negotiations topics that we do. I love it when we do I love the theoretical part of real estate because you're going to find it's the theoretical side that makes you a better real estate agent. It's the theoretical side and understanding how this works that really makes you a better real estate agent. I want to thank everybody out there for watching. Obviously, I want to thank Mike and David for their time. They're busy guys. They make their time all the time, sometimes on a minute notice. I won't be shy about the fact that I picked this topic up about an hour ago. So they were thrilled with that. So they were very prepared to have to come in and address that issue. But I'm going to also tell you, it shows how good they are too, that I can drop a topic on them in an hour and they're ready to go. Quite honestly, I wouldn't even have to drop the topic on them. I could just tell them.
Keeps us on our toes too.
Yeah, they're going to be ready to go. So thank everybody out there. Thank you for always rewatching the show. Always make sure you encourage somebody else if you've gained something from it that they should watch the show too. You can always get our archive on the KVGI Facebook page. You just scroll down in there and you flip through. You'll see that our logo and our emblem is very easy to see. And those shows go all the way back. They're archived for about a year or two out there. So thank y'all for watching. Have a great week. We'll talk to you guys really soon.
Thanks, everybody.